Okay, hello everyone. Today I will present my research project titled Pedagogical Uses of Spanish in English Classes. In this study, I analyze how the use of the mother tongue can enhance the second language acquisition. So the research question is, how does a teacher at Open House English Institute use Spanish to facilitate learning in English classes across different proficiency levels? The key concept here is facilitation, which aligns with Elisa's arguments in Chapter 6, where he discusses how Spanish can sometimes be a barrier, but can also serve as a useful tool for learning. I broke this question into three different objectives. The first is to determine the extent to which the teacher uses Spanish. The second is to explore the reasons behind its use. And the third is to examine how the teacher incorporates Spanish into their classes using corrective feedback strategies as outlined by Elisa in Chapter 7. It suggests elicitation, explicit correction, confirmation check, among others. And here you can see a picture of the class that I observed, one of the classes that I observed. Regarding the methodology, I adopted a mixed methods approach, combining both quantitative and qualitative data. Is also for data collection, I drew on Donoso's research, which examined Chilean teachers' perceptions of using Spanish in their classes through observations, recordings, and also an observation sheet. However, my focus here is on the actual use of Spanish, not in the teacher's perception. So what I did is to observe and record two classes from different levels, A1 and B1, and adapted the Donoso's observation sheet. But this is the sheet, but I removed the always, usually, sometimes, seldom, and never scale. And instead, I mark with an X for each instance that the teacher used Spanish. As you can see here. I also leave some spaces in blank to getting know and other reasons why the teacher may use Spanish. So then I transcribe all the instances in which the professor needed to use Spanish, and I also track the time spent on these instances to understand in which context Spanish use is most necessary, depending on the proficiency level. And finally, for the qualitative analysis, I categorize the data according to the purpose, the extent, and the feedback strategies that supported this Spanish use. Okay. So regarding the results, and to answer the first question about the extent to which the teacher needed to use Spanish at different levels, I found that the amount of time spent speaking Spanish varies significantly between these two levels. So, for example, at the A1 level, the teacher spent a 60% of the class speaking in Spanish, while at the B1 level, this dropped to only the 14%. This suggests that at earlier levels, learners tend to rely more on their first language, as they have not yet developed a strong interlanguage, unlike B1 learners who are more capable of working in the target language directly. In terms of the teacher's objectives, Spanish was primarily used to explain vocabulary at the A1 level, as you can see, and grammar at the B1 level. This pattern can be explained by the typical order of language acquisition, where learners first acquire and understand vocabulary before progressing to sentence formation. And finally, for the qualitative analysis, I focus just on the four more significant uses of Spanish for strictly pedagogical purposes. That is, explaining vocabulary, morphology, pronunciation, and grammar. Okay. So for the qualitative categorization, we will analyze several samples from the audio transcription. In the first sample, as you can see, the teacher at the A1 level is explaining how to say sofá, sillón, and muebles in English. The use of Spanish might initially seem like a simple vocabulary explanation, but a closer examination reveals that the teacher is relying on Spanish because both languages share similar categories. So, for instance, the teacher doesn't need to explain what furniture, sofa, or armchair are, as the corresponding terms in Spanish already convey the same concepts. Therefore, Spanish serves as a tool for positive transfer. Regarding the strategies used, the teacher introduces Spanish using elicitation strategies when she asks, how do you say muebles? Not sofá, but muebles en general muebles. Okay. And also when she says, ¿cómo se llama el sitio donde solo se sienta una persona? These strategies invite the students to analyze the terms and to respond. Additionally, she uses a confirmation check strategy when she says, el sofá es largo, ¿cierto? So then she can rely on this knowledge to make the students to understand the differences in English terms. Okay. As you can see, these are the same categories that are shared by both languages. Okay. In the second sample, the B1 level learners are analyzing different forms of art, but they encountered difficulty in expressing escultura in English. So then they ask the teacher for help. The teacher takes advantage of the cognates shared by Spanish and English, as both sculpture and escultura come from the Latin root escultura. However, she also needs to clarify pronunciation to avoid negative transfer. Additionally, the use of Spanish is supported by elicitation, as you can see in the words highlighted by pink. But also she introduced explicit correction when she says es similar al español escultura. Providing valuable information that helps the student to correct the response by saying the full word sculpture rather than just scope. Okay, that's it. Okay, so in the third sample, the teacher is correcting the pronunciation of the word garden at the A1 level. She explains to her students that they should not rely on their mother tongue here, as Spanish pronunciation could interfere. So the use of Spanish here serves to prevent negative transfer and make a language contrast. The teacher employs here both explicit correction and enhancement, and the last one can be evident when she says, al final tienen que imaginarse que no hay vocal, it's not den but dun. So she is highlighting how is the correct pronunciation, and then this could be acquired by the learners. Okay, so here the purpose is to avoid interference. Okay, in the fourth and fifth samples that we're going to analyze, the teacher appears to use Spanish to explain morphology and grammar, but a deeper analysis reveals that she is relying on the similarities between Spanish and English word and sentence formation. Okay, so in the first case, that is the sample that you are looking right now. At the A1 level, the students believe that they don't know how to say secador de pelo in English, but they already know how to say pelo and secadora separately. So the teacher uses Spanish to explain that just as happened in Spanish, English combines these words in a similar way. Here as you can see here, here she is employing again elicitation, explicit correction, and she decided to introduce output prompting because when she says, okay, is secador, she encouraged the students to produce the correct response based on the discussed linguistic features. Okay. And finally, in the fifth sample from the B1 level, the teacher addresses a similar issue with collocations in this case, because a student incorrectly says want to feel, as you can see, instead of saying quieren hacer sentir. That is not the same, right? So the teacher prompts the student to think about the Spanish structure, helping her to realize that she needs another word after quieren. This allows the student to recall the necessary verb, that in this case is hacer. Then she translated and say make. So in this example, the teacher used both elicitation and also recast strategies, as you can see here. So, for example, in the first case, she decided to change the want to Spanish quieren, to guide the student to produce the correct answer. And the second instance in which the recast happened is when the student says hacerlo instead of hacer, and the teacher immediately corrects it to hacer. Okay, so here you can see that if the teacher is relying on the grammar structure of Spanish to explain how does it work in English too. Okay, and finally, here is the summarized classification, which clarifies that Spanish can be useful for different purposes, such as explaining familiar categories or cognates between both languages, as well as avoiding interference and explaining words or sentences formation. However, it's important to note that Spanish was particularly necessary for explaining familiar categories, word formation, and also avoiding interference at the A1 level. This may be because learners at this stage rely more heavily on their mother tongue, needing guidance on what is transferable and what is not, especially in terms of vocabulary and pronunciation. On the other hand, Spanish was required at the B1 level to explain the sentence formation and cognates. This could be because learners at this level are less likely to rely on their mother tongue. So, highlighting similarities between the languages can help strengthen their interlanguage, making it easier to connect both languages. Additionally, as mentioned earlier, students at these levels focus more on sentence structure, right? So helping them to transfer similar characteristics from Spanish may allow them to form sentences more quickly and accurately. And this was my presentation. Here you can see the bibliography that I used, and I already explained with which purposes I used them. And that's it. I hope that you get some meaningful information from this presentation. Thank you. Bye.